The 90s, a time of peak culture. We didn't realize how good we had it. Instead of skibbity toilets, we had skip-a-dippy discs. Instead of Pokemon, we had Tamagotchi. You had to enter a blood code if you wanted to see the gore in Mortal Kombat. And every kid was hoping they would get the chance to compete on one of many Nickelodeon game shows, although that would turn out to be much darker than we were originally led to believe. There was a Blockbuster Video in every city and a phone attached with a physical cable to every kitchen wall. If you wanted to look up information, you actually had to go into a building that hoarded books and know who Dewey was and how his decimal system worked. But it was also a time for peak artistic musical expression. Without the absolute saturation and homogenization of the internet, it seemed like every band brought something new and exciting to the table. And while the main access to music was gatekept through major record labels and platforms like MTV or FM radio, there was a flourishing underground scene of now highly influential heavy metal acts. In the mainstream, there were bands playing on every nothing but rock FM station every hour, like Metallica or Pantera. But in the underground, there was a totally different movement happening in the extreme music scene. While bands like Cannibal Corpse would benefit greatly from their appearance in Ace Ventura, most of these bands remained underground simply because they didn't want to sacrifice their artistic integrity to have clean vocals. That might sound like a weird statement in today's metal scene, especially after the extreme popularity of metalcore in the 2000s and its comeback as of late, but this was actually a huge deal in the 90s. It really makes you appreciate media like Headbangers Ball or 120 Minutes and Matt Pinfield's Bald Head, which, while confined to the format and bureaucracy of a major media brand like MTV, did their best to give shine to a lot of underground, or what I would call working class, metal music acts. Nailed it. And while there was a strong underground movement whose news and information was mostly sustained by tape trades and magazines, none of that stuff was really breaking through unless they decided to have a song with clean, or at least on-pitch vocals. And it's a shame, because one of the greatest extreme metal albums came out in the 90s and mostly flew under the radar for many years until it organically made its way through the underground scene and directly inspired a whole wave of new music dubbed the Gothenburg sound. And while there are other artists that also contributed to this sound, the album and the band that we're talking about today is, of course, At the Gates with Slaughter of the Soul. If you're new to this series, we are going to tone quest for At the Gates tone by deep diving through lore, seeing what we can learn about the vibe and the atmosphere used to capture the record, and if we can recreate any of it. If you're just here for guitar noises, use the chapters. The goal of these videos is to appreciate the craft and the magic, if you want to be woo-woo about it, that went into making these albums and trying to understand it the best we can, not just recreating the exact tone, which would be a lot easier to do with plugins in 2026. If I'm being honest. I also, unfortunately, have to warn you that if you want to hear At the Gates music, this platform makes it very hard to do that without being the target for record labels, or people pretending to be record labels, stealing your ad revenue. So as a rule, I generally don't play or use the music for references, but in this case, it's necessary in some places. So if you're watching this and there are abrupt cuts after I reference something, it's because I had to remove it. Sorry. And as you will see in this video, it gets very expensive, and I was very fortunate enough to find a sponsor for today's video, and that sponsor is Gear Exchange and Sweetwater. We'll get into that more later. So all that being said, there's only one thing to do. Let's go! At the Gates was formed in Gothenburg, Sweden in 1990, a city not only famous for its Dutch-style canals, but also its strong coffee culture and Volvo, like the car company. It's also known for being the birthplace of a specific style of melodic death metal referred to as the Gothenburg style. I know, we were really creative with our naming conventions in the 90s. And one of the pioneering albums that would bring the sound to the masses in a very long and convoluted way was Slaughter of the Soul. We'll get into why that process took so long in a minute. It was produced at Fredman's studio by Fredrik Nordstrom, you know, the famous producer that invented the Fredman technique, in the summer of 1995, and released on Earache Records later that same year. This would also mark the band's final release before breaking up in 1996, with 3 of the members going on to form The Haunted. They reformed in 2010, and despite the recent tragic passing of vocalist Thomas Lindberg, still plan on releasing new music with vocals he had completed prior to his death. Now, why is Slaughter of the Soul so significant in the band's catalog, especially among their later releases? Well, Slaughter was the culmination of something that had been happening in the underground scene, the refinement of this melodic metal sound that they would become synonymous with. There is a very good chance that if you were into the metal or deathcore sound of the 2000s, see, that's a callback. I set that up on purpose. Then your favorite bands were likely influenced heavily by At the Gates directly or indirectly. Now, it's important to remember that in the pre-internet era, the way underground music spread was by word of mouth. And I know that concept seems odd to people who grew up with the idea that word of mouth is posting about your favorite band on TikTok, but the way that it worked pre-internet was you would discover a cool band, usually from a record store, and you'd IRL tell a friend. And then they tell two friends, and then they tell two friends, and then they tell two friends, and so on, and so on, and so on. And it took a while, especially for underground bands, to gain the sort of traction that current acts can gain today in a few hours by going viral on social media. And as much as I want to wax poetic about the meaning of art in music and how it felt more meaningful in an era where it was scarce and you didn't have every song in your back pocket, I think you get the idea. When a really great album came out, it would keep spreading, even if the band that created it wasn't around anymore. Hell, that's how I found out about At the Gates. There's a line cook that I worked with that was into obscure underground music. Probably died inside a little when all the heaviest bands I could name were all new metal bands that have been on the TRL rotation in the last year. Look, Stained used to be heavy music! Slaughter of the Soul was the fourth release from the Swedish death metal pioneers, and in a Guitar World interview from 2014, vocalist Thomas Lindberg recalls, coming off of terminal spirit disease, we actually had a sit down where we were focused on creating something special. We were at a bit of a musical make it or break it point. Either we put all of our effort into this album and make a great album, or we might as well break up. Luckily, the band persevered at least for a little while and put out one of the most iconic records in all of heavy metal. But that wouldn't last long, as they would disband shortly after, with founding guitarist Anders Björler stating, "I had just had enough. 8 months of touring and we got paid only in alcohol and beer." It's a shame in some ways, because Slaughter kept growing and inspiring more and more acts, and the band that created it wasn't there to capitalize on its growing popularity. Sure, they had formed other bands and were still active musicians, but it's not quite the same thing. In 2006, for the reissue release of Slaughter of the Soul, vocalist Thomas, guitarist Martin, and producer Frederick sat down for an interview for what would be a documentary on the making of the classic album, which is now available on Earache's YouTube channel. And through coincidental timing, maybe the nostalgia mixed with the realization of what a colossus that album had become over the last 10 years, it prompted the band to reunite for a tour in 2008, leading to their eventual reformation in 2010, which saw them follow up Slaughter of the Soul with 2014's At War with Reality. And though it had been 19 years since the band had been in the studio together, it seems like they picked up right where they left off with a pretty much universally well-received album. So back to Slaughter of the Soul and the production, specifically the guitar tone. I mean, that's why we're here, right? Hello? There are two accounts of the guitar signal chain here, and they're both kind of vague, but mostly the same in some ways. I'm hoping, like with most of these videos, someone who was there or is in the know will leave a comment verifying some of this, but you never know. The first comes directly from Fredrik Nordstrom on the making of the Slaughter of the Soul documentary. The producer stated that Anders used an ugly Ibanez guitar into a metal zone into a 𝗶𝗶 𝗰𝗶 160 head. The old teal stripe version. And all of that was running through Anders' homemade cab, which had two 12-inch speakers and two 10-inch speakers, two of which supposedly weren't working, mic'd up with 4 SM57s. So there's some information to work with there. Now there's Anders' recollection, which usually appears online as other people quoting him. But using the Wayback Machine, I was able to track down this quoted reference of his signal chain at the time. 20-ish years ago, they used to have a Q&A section on their website, and you can read through Anders responding to questions, which is really cool. I miss the old web days, before this was just a feature on Instagram stories. Here, we come across a few questions about the Slaughter of the Soul tone.
Your guys' unique sound has been well documented. With all these years having passed by, have you guys had to dig out some old equipment, or is your current rig versatile enough to get you the sound that caught all of our attention 10+ years ago? Or hell, have you even given it much thought? I'd be very interested to hear anything you had to say concerning this. Matthew.
Well, basically there's nothing to dig up. All the old equipment is gone and is nowhere to be found. We feel that we can get equipment that are versatile enough and that sound close to what we used to use, no problem. Most of the sound is in the playing and execution anyway. Second, all the albums are recorded with different amps, drums, guitars, etc. So I guess we have no coherent sound anyway, so it doesn't matter. It changed throughout and we can't really have different gear for each song.
I read you used the Boss Metal Zone on Slaughter of the Soul. So do you remember? Your setting on the pedal, or do you have a nice setting for the metal zone which is good for ATG covers? Because I have that pedal too. Toby.
We used Boss Metal Zone and Boss Heavy Metal on 0 distortion to get the crunch. Can't remember the settings, it was 12 years ago.
I know it's been 11 years or so since Slaughter of the Soul was released, but the guitar tone is legendary. Do you remember any of the guitar setup in the studio, such as heads, pickups, or pedals? Thanks so much, 𝗶𝗶𝗶.
I remember some of it, but not 100%. I had a 𝗶𝗶 𝗰𝗶𝗹 160 amp, which is solid state, playing on the clean channel. I had 2 distortion pedals, serial, 1 Boss Heavy Metal on 0 distortion to get the crunch. The main pedal was Boss Metal Zone. The cab was home built by me and my dad, so I don't remember. I guess it was 2x12 and 2x10 speakers, Celestian. The guitar I used was an Ibanez maxxas with an EMG 81 in the bridge. We used 2 𝗔 SM 57 to mic it up.
So I think between these accounts we can find overlapping information that can help us on our tone quest. The main tone seems to be a metal zone going into the front of a PV Supreme into a one-of-a-kind homemade cabinet and boosted by an HM2. Probably. The guitar Anders used was an indeed ugly EMG81 equipped Ibanez maxxas guitar. The speakers in the homemade cab were some kind of Celestion speakers. Probably. And they were either mic'd with 2 or 4 SM57 microphones. The thing that I'm unsure about here is Anders mentions using an HM2 to essentially boost the metal zone pedal, but I've never had a tremendous amount of success doing that, and Frederick never mentions the HM2. I will say the Slaughter of the Soul tone does sound HM2-ish to me, and that's the popular opinion when it comes to this guitar tone, but it's a pretty distinctive piece of equipment, so you'd think the producer would remember. There's an Ultimate Metal forum where people are discussing it, and one person chimed in that Frederick actually wrote in the liner notes of the album, I assume the 2002 or the 2006 re-release, that it was a Boss SD1 into a metal zone. But I wasn't able to find those liner notes. If you know what this is all about, please leave it in the comments. Either way, it's just more variables to experiment with. In the Earache documentary, Thomas even mentions that the guitar tone process was a lot of back and forth and them going through several different configurations of equipment before landing on what was used on the album.
We tested a lot of speakers and a lot of heads as well, a lot of pedals before we settled on this. So it was a hard work, you know, trying to figure out which way to go.
So I'm sure the details are a bit hazy. There's also this sort of lumping together of 90s Swedish death metal bands and their sounds that might come into play here as well. Bands like Entombed were pretty well known for using an HM2 pedal heavily, and I feel like a lot of bands from that era get that sound attributed to them, whether they use the HM2 or not. Besides, if I'm being honest with you, I'm less concerned about the HM2 than I am the one-of-a-kind homemade cabinet built by me and my dad. I mean, how am I gonna find one of those? I don't even have a dad. I'm just kidding, I have a dad, but he lives in another state. And I don't think he knows anything about building guitar cabinets either. So here's what we're gonna do. I have an Ibanez S series, which was the successor to the maxxas and is less ugly, if we're being honest. I need to put an EMG81 in it, but that covers the guitar. I have both the HM2 and the metal zone pedals, and a Boss SD1. I don't have a PV Supreme 160, but I do have a later model PV solid state that we can try. If that thing sucks, then maybe we'll use the Marshall valve state in its place, since that would have been a similar popular amp in the 90s. But the only thing I can't account for is the cab. Okay, Tim the Toolman Taylor. Looks like I'm building my own one-of-a-kind homemade cabinet. In true poor musician fashion, I'm going to try and keep this at a minimum budget, which is hilarious given the price of wood currently, but we are trying to keep the DIY spirit alive on this one.
You can just head down towards that porta potty right down there. Jim, be careful.
I can't hear it. I feel like I'm yelling at you. I will need speakers though, obviously, and for that we're going to have to turn to the interwebs and the used gear market, which is where today's sponsor, Gear Exchange, comes in. Give me a break, okay? This one's gonna be expensive. I needed to have a sponsor. Let's go see what we can find. But my assumption is they were probably using a homemade cab because, you know, that's what was available, like that was the option.
Remember, we didn't have any money.
So in the spirit of that, you know, hodgepodging used speakers into a homemade cab, I think that kind of fits the theme. You know what I'm saying? So while this might not be the specific speaker that was being used, and since we don't have that information readily available, we're just gonna go with it and we'll just, you know, we'll see what happens. We'll have fun. You know, I think we're gonna be fine, okay? Okay, so here we are on Gear Exchange, searching for 4 speakers. I really should be searching for 2, but I think I'm just gonna get 4. It just feels weird building a cabinet with, you know, 2 not speakers in it. Let's look for the 12-inch speakers first. Actually, let's look for the 10-inch speakers first, right? Now, I don't know what would have been really popular in terms of, oof, we're gonna be limited here on the 10-inch speakers. So it looks like we have 2 16-ohm greenbacks, and that's $47 for shipping. Holy shit, dude. G1250 12-inch 50-watt speaker. So we do have this 30-inch greenback, which I think is a good move. Let's see if there's any others here. Let's just look for Celestion speaker and see what we find. Okay, so in terms of 12-inch speakers, I think we're pretty good. Now, the question is, what would be popular in the 90s, since I can't personally find any information on what speakers were being used in the cabinet. The only thing I could find was Celestion speakers. So we're gonna be doing a little bit of guessing here. I'm guessing G1275s and vintage 30s would be popular options at that time. And we want to keep everything the same impedance, right? So we're talking about 16 ohm Celestions. Use Celestion G12K100 12-inch. Ooh, 16 ohm. Let's definitely snag this one. So I'm gonna go ahead and pick up this G12K100. This was really popularized by Mick Thompson from Slipknot, if you're not familiar with that lore, but this isn't a Slipknot lore video, so I'm not gonna go into that too much. But yeah, we're gonna snag this guy. Let's see if we get any hits for 10-inch speaker. I'm gonna go ahead and grab this 10-inch greenback too. It's a 16 ohm greenback. It makes sense. I know greenbacks pair really well with other speakers too, so we'll just go ahead and snag this guy. You know, $90 for the speaker and $15 for shipping, 105 total. It's really not that bad. Let's look for the other 10. I think the 10-inch speaker is gonna be the harder one to find. Like this one just says it's stock speaker replacement. I'm gonna assume this is a 12-inch speaker because it doesn't say on it. 12-inch, 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 12-inch. So there's a G10 Vintage 10, but it's 8 ohms. This would be harder than I thought. An iconic 10-inch speaker, 16 ohm. I mean, it would fill that 10-inch spot. Maybe not my first pick. I mean, it is a Celestion speaker. I just don't have a lot of confidence in the speaker. You know, it's 50 bucks, $20 shipping. This is pretty inexpensive, you know, for science. Let's just do this. Okay, so even though I have some T75s, to be honest with you, I've never really liked the sound of the T75s that I have. And I know there's good T75s out there because I have a friend who has them in a cabinet and they sounded awesome by comparison. Like much smoother, less shrill sounding, both 16 ohm speakers, probably just different years. And I came across this one here and it's listed as a 2010s T75. However, the date stamp is on the leg here. And if you look this up on Celestion speakers and want to see the date codes and how old my speaker is, it says right here, if it's stamped on the chassis leg, it's 1968 to 2001. And then they're printed on a white ID label and stuck on the magnet 2001 and later. So this would be a 2000 G12 T75, not a 2010. I'm just gonna buy it. We're gonna go with it. I think I'm still under budget here. I set a budget of $500 for the speakers, and I think we're still well under that. So it's just, you know, why not, right? Let's just try it. Let's see what happens. It'll be fun. All right, now we play the waiting game. Okay, I'm very excited about this part of the video. I've had this guitar for a long time. Also, well, let me open it up and I'll explain it to you. So this is my Ibanez S Prestige. I don't know what the model number is, S5470 Prestige something. You can see this was the successor of the maxxas series. You know, it has that same sort of rounded, thin shape. And, you know, it originally had some DiMarzio pickups, which I really didn't like. I put EMGs in it. And then at some point I swapped them out for these passive pickups here. Probably towards the beginning of my YouTube channel, which is probably the last time that I touched this guitar or cleaned it or did anything to it. And especially now knowing so much more about setting up instruments and maintaining them, I'm just really excited to do this. So I actually have an extra set of EMGs, which is cool. It's cool to not have to buy a set. But I have an 85 and a 81. Hopefully the 81 works. You tell these are different eras of EMGs by the logo, so hopefully there's no issues there with that. Yeah, I have that, and I have a bunch of extra, you know, parts, because every time you buy a single EMG, it comes with, you know, all the parts you need to wire them, so I inherently just have extra EMG harnesses and quick connect wires and stuff laying around, so I think I have enough to put this whole thing together. Let's get this bad boy set up. So one of the interesting things about this guitar is it has a zero resistance tremolo on it. Now, if I remember correctly, the thing that's supposed to be so great about this tremolo specifically is that it's supposed to be balanced. That way, if you break a string, it still goes back to zero. So with the Floyd Rose, if you break a string, it messes up the tension on the whole guitar. The whole thing goes way out of tune. That has never been my experience. And I wonder if I've just never set up this guitar properly, you know, because despite owning it for many years and being very familiar with Floyd Rose tremolos, thinking about it now, like looking at it, I'm like, I don't remember how to set this up. So maybe I never set this up correctly. And if you look here, you can just see how dirty this thing is. We're gonna take this whole thing apart and just clean it. I was just tracking down issues, which I think mostly just had to do with the switch. Now, the most difficult part about this situation is going to be fitting everything in this tiny little cavity. I used to have EMGs in this, and I have no idea how I did it before because I did it with a tone knob as well. So I don't know. We're just gonna hope for the best. Day 2, after much frustration. There's just not a ton of room to work with in this control cavity. In retrospect, I should have just hand wired everything and not tried to use the quick connect system because it just makes more stuff that you have to cram into that little cavity. But the problem with that is the only pots that I have are those quick connect pots. So, you know, that just, it is what it is. But anyways, you know, it looks so much better now. After deep cleaning it and polishing the frets, yeah. This guitar just looks so much better. The frets, you know, they're getting to the point now where they probably need to be leveled and recrowned and everything. I didn't want to do all that work, so I just tried to polish them up the best I could to get through the video. Okay, let's talk Ibanez necks. Ibanez have probably the most neck profiles out of any company ever. I'm just guessing. And they're all over the place. If I remember correctly, this is the Wizard 2 neck, but I'm not 100% on that. But either way, let me just give you the measurements here. Width at the nut, we are at 43.57 millimeters, which comes out to 1.71 inches, 7.2, if you want to be a stickler about it. At the 12th fret, we're at 53.16 millimeters, or 2.09 inches. And the way that this guitar feels, I think the string spacing is a little bit wider than your typical guitar. It feels wider, like the neck feels flatter and wider compared to my other guitars. So the measurements don't necessarily reflect that, but that is what it feels like when you play it. Up here at the 1st fret, we are at 18.78 millimeters, or 0.73, really call it 74 inches. And at the 12th fret, we're at 20.54 millimeters, or 0.8081 inches. And this is what the neck profile looks like. It is very flat in the back, kind of D-shaped, I guess I would say. Ultra thin and really comfortable to play, but I have had other S-series guitars with Wizard necks that were quite a bit different than this, that were not comfortable to play. They were just like a big fat D neck. So, you know, they're all different. Ibanez, out of every company, has the most variation in neck profiles that I've ever experienced. Now, take that with a grain of salt because I haven't tried every guitar in the world, but you know, yeah. Okay, 17.42 on the bridge. This is an older EMG, you can tell by the logo, so, you know, just take that for what it's worth. At the neck, we're also at 17.32, which leaves us with 13.44 in the middle. Not that we'll be using the neck, but it's good to know, right? Now, I thought this would be a really great section to do like a montage of me walking through a hardware store, but I don't want to go to the hardware store. So I'm gonna order online and have it delivered because that's more convenient since I have to order sheets of ply. We'll get to what I'm ordering here in a second. I'll talk you through it. And for those of you in the comments that are like good at woodworking or know how to make guitar cabinets, you know, be gentle. This is my first time doing any of this, but I feel like some of these details might be important. Okay, so here's my shopping cart from Lowe's, because I don't f with Home Depot. If you know, you know. The first thing here, or the last thing in my cart, is 3/4 inch 4x8 maple sanded plywood. The reason that I chose this plywood is just, it's what they had. It was either this or oak, and maple is probably much lighter and probably makes for a better guitar cabinet. So I went with the maple, 3/4 inch, obviously, because thicker plywood is better and it's not particle board. So, you know, I'm trying here. I'm doing my best with what I have. So I had to get 2 4x8 sheets. That should cover the whole, you know, square part of the cabinet, the baffle, and then the back as well. Okay, just want to chime in here on this. You could probably get away with using one sheet, but the thing that I didn't mention right here is I actually bought two just in case I miscut something, so I would have extra because I'm a noob. I already explained this. Anyways, I'm aware that I could probably go to a specialty wood store, but again, I'm trying to do this like on a budget and in a way that most people could. You know, most people have Lowe's around them, I feel like. Not that you should copy what I'm doing, but I'm just saying, you know, like this is an everyman's cabinet because I feel like that's the DIY ethos. I bought these square poplar dowels. These will go on the outside to hold the baffle in, and then also on the back for the back part to screw into. Because my plan as of right now is to have a cabinet that you can open the back on, and then I'm gonna rear mount the speakers. But that's what I got. And I also need to get, I forgot, I took this out of my cart on accident. I need to get like a center brace. I was thinking 4x4, but then I looked it up and, you know, all the forums say you use 2x2, so 2x2x8's a lot, but I don't know if I can find anything shorter than that. And now I think I have everything. Delivery's gonna cost me 80 bucks. Woof. Oh yeah, there's no way. Nope. Okay, so that thing will not fit in the back of my car. I am gonna have to get a delivery. So ignore that I'm paying an exorbitant amount of money for shipping on this. We're at $222 for all the wood and the screws. Now, this is not taking into account any tools or wood. I have wood glue at home already, but this isn't covering the tools that I would need to do this. Potentially the grill cloth. I'm not gonna be putting Tolex on this, so it's not covering that. Casters, if you want a caster. Like, I'm not including any of that in this build, so just keep that in mind. I think it's gonna be fine for testing out our situation here. Now the time has come to make this one-of-a-kind homemade guitar cabinet. I don't know what I'm doing, so wish me luck. Okay, I'm a very visual person, so I have to draw things out and really try to conceptualize it before I want to commit to doing anything, so that's what I'm doing here. And before anyone makes fun of my knee pads, I got them from your mom, so there. I realized after I did all of that this piece of plywood was actually better looking, so I decided to make all the cuts here. I also put everything really close together so that I wouldn't have to make as many cuts since I'm not using a table saw. And if you've never used a skill saw to make straight cuts like this, just go really slow. You'll be fine. I have 4 pieces of wood that are roughly the same size. Within the margin of error, I would say this one's a little wonky in the middle. But now what I'm gonna do is I'm actually gonna line all these things up and then just sand them so they're all exactly the same size. But I don't own a hand sander, so yeah, I gotta go get one. Okay, here I am measuring out the baffle, and if I ever learned anything from working in construction, you always measure from the factory edge because it's straight. So that's what I'm doing here. I'm cutting off the excess and cutting the baffle from the factory edge in. Okay, this was funny here. I thought I would just make this grid into thirds and then place the speakers in the center where the grid intersected. That didn't work out at all. It looked weird, so I decided to just kind of eyeball and then measure the speakers and just make them as square and the same-ish as possible, and that worked out much better. One thing I learned is the amount of sanding you have to do when you're building a guitar cabinet is insane. Okay, I bought these little corner clamps, and I don't think I put them in the total cost. They were like $15 or something like that, but they actually came in handy. And here I'm just slathering everything in wood glue with a paintbrush before I screw it together. And before someone chimes in the comments like, oh, you should have dovetailed the joints. Dude, this is my first time building a cabinet. Come on, I'm not gonna make any sort of dovetail joints. And besides, I don't think anyone's gonna notice or care that these aren't dovetail joints. And while this may not surprise a lot of you, like, obviously, you can build a box out of plywood. That's not a big deal, right? It does surprise me because I'm not good at this stuff. So if I can do it, you for sure can do it. Also, these things came in really handy. It's like having an extra set of hands or something. Cool. So I bought these dowels thinking, you know, I would just put these like so to be able to screw the baffle to something, but these are actually much smaller than I thought they were gonna be like double this size. So you can see, I think normally what you do is cut strips of plywood, but that's kind of a pain in the ass without a table saw, right? So, but you can see how thick the plywood is by comparison. So maybe it's worth it. Okay, so I was kind of tired of spending money at this point, and I decided instead of buying a tool to make these circles, I would just try and use a nail and a string, and that didn't work out great. The string kept slipping. I had to measure several times before I could cut it with a jigsaw. But you know, the holes came out mostly straight. Like I said before, if you're gonna do something like this by hand, just go really slow and take your time. It's now nighttime, and I think I'm gonna call it a day. I actually decided to cut the strips of plywood that the baffle sits up against. I just think it looks better. You know, especially once they're all glued in and like sanded and stained and everything. I think it'll look good. I'm actually getting excited about this. I think this thing might turn out pretty good. I have my circle adjacent holes in the baffle here for the speakers. I think they're gonna be fine. You know, you're not gonna see it anyways. You can kind of get the idea of what's happening here though. I have the 12s and the 10 inches in an X pattern just because I thought that would probably be best for this. I mean, maybe the 10 should be up top and the 12 should be up, but I don't really know. But I think it's gonna be cool. And more sanding. Another thing I realized is that I should have cut the holes for the handles before I decided to build this box. Oh, look at this little worm here. Look at this little worm crawling through all the sawdust. Poor guy. Anyway, so I had to make a pit stop and cut the holes for the handles. Okay, this is technically day 3, but I'm really only like maybe 4 hours into this project. You know, but I have something that resembles the cabinet now. I decided it was worth the effort to cut a bunch of 1-inch strips out of the plywood for, you know, the little lip that the baffle is going to screw to. So what I need to do is glue these on and screw them in, and then I'll be able to install the baffle, and then it should start to sort of resemble a cab. The one thing I'm not quite sure of yet is I need to paint the baffle before it goes in and put the grill cloth on it, because I won't be able to do that after I screw it down. The reason I'm hesitant about doing all this stuff is because I'm running out of time. Okay, it's not the prettiest thing in the world, but you know, I think it's gonna work. I somehow managed to cut all of these little strips too short twice. So what I did is I just wedged some little pieces in there and then cut them off with my jigsaw, and I'll sand these. Hopefully I have time to sand these, but I really got to get this baffle in and get these speakers mounted and get the back cut, and then see where I'm at for the rest of the day, because I have to test this tomorrow if I'm going to have enough time to finish this video. One cool thing, you guys remember when I tried to stain that fretboard and it didn't really work out? Well, I still have the wood stain from that, so I'm going to use that for this cabinet. And I found some wood filler too, because there's definitely some voids in this plywood. Probably want to plug this up before I stain it, so yeah, let's just get to it. And I know you're probably looking around at my work area and judging me for how messy it is. This is my process, bro. I gotta be so judgmental. Directions say to wipe it off immediately. Probably should have let this sit a little bit longer, but it looks really good. You can do the whole cab like this. Tolex, you don't need Tolex, so it's way cooler. I wanted to make sure that the baffle fit really tight, so being very careful about how much I was taking off. I tried to sand it initially, but that was taking forever. So I actually learned this cool trick from when I used to work construction. You measure how far offset your skill saw is from the edge of the guard, and then you use something that you know is straight. In this case, I used a level, and I clamped it down so that I would only take off like a blade's width of wood every time I did a pass on this, and doing that enough times, I was able to get the baffle in and get it to fit really tight. Okay, so this thing's a little bit too big, the baffle, to fit in there with the grill cloth on it. But I sanded it down a little bit, and then I just went and sanded my oblong speaker circles. I just kind of, you know, rounded the corners a little bit, just in case this doesn't fit with the grill cloth. Because if it doesn't fit with the grill cloth, I'm just gonna have to abandon the grill cloth just to get this thing done. I don't know, cross your fingers. I did get this done off camera while it was charging. You know, these are the little strips that will secure the back panel. So there's that. Okay, so same thing here. I wanted the back panel to fit really, really tight. So it's just a matter of, you know, making these minute changes to it, measuring, trying to see if it'll fit and just going back and forth until it finally pops into place. I forgot to mention this earlier, but I actually had some grill cloth just laying around from a previous cabinet I was going to restore. So the grill cloth didn't cost anything, but I didn't do the greatest job putting it in. The baffle fits so tight that I think when I put it in, it actually snagged and kind of pulled the grill cloth loose. So I just tried to get the baffle in with the grill cloth on. I think I can make it fit. It's very tight, but I think I can make it fit. So I decided I have a little bit of daylight left here, maybe like an hour or something like that. What I'm going to try and do is sand everything down and then stain it. Yeah, and then get the baffle in, and hopefully I can get the speakers. I'm going to try and get this done tonight as much as possible, but we'll just have to see how much I can get done in the next couple hours. Well, I have something that sort of resembles a cab now. And the thing I've been grappling with is, do I stain it? Do I take the time to stain it because it's starting to get dark right now? You know, I think that I wish I had more time to work on this thing, but I don't. And it is what it is. I'm just going to do my best with the time that I have. So I'm going to stain it, get the baffle in. Hopefully I can get the support in as well. Maybe get the speakers in. Just kind of see how far we get. All right, so all in all, not too bad. The Tolex is a little wrinkly. I think I dramatically underestimated how tight I had to stretch it. I wanted to stain it before I put this in because this thing is in here so tight, I probably didn't even need to screw the baffle in. It's so tight that like I don't think I'm getting it out without a hammer. It's getting late though. I did want to finish this. Tomorrow what I'm gonna have to do is put in the support for the baffle, put in the back panel, stain the back panel, put in the handles on the sides. They say to wipe that stain off immediately, and I don't buy that. I think that you probably need to let the stain sit for quite a while because you don't get quite the darkness out of it. I think my floor might be a little bit uneven there, but you know, it's mostly stable. I mean, maybe it's not a perfect square, but this is my first cabinet I've ever built. Come on, give me a break. Let's unbox the speakers that we ordered and put them in here. I also bought a wiring harness, not totally necessary. I could wire this myself, but I'm just trying to expedite this process as much as possible. Let's see what the first speaker is. This is the 12-inch G12T75. And yeah, this looks like an older one. It's in great condition. So we need to pick one of the 12. I think it's gonna be there. Let's just drill these down then. I'm doing this with wood screws. You would use T-nuts and like machine screws conventionally, but yeah, this is what I have. Okay, I think all things considered, I did a pretty good job. Like the speakers are not impeded by the holes not being exactly round. The grill cloth I'm not super stoked on. It's really wrinkly, but you know what, if I'm gonna put the T-nuts in, maybe I will pull it out and I'll put the T-nuts in and fix the grill cloth in the future, okay? I'm tired. What's up? I'm so glad that I'm finally here. It felt like the longest journey ever just to get here. But I'm really glad that we got to go through this whole thing together. You know, I learned a lot. I feel like a changed man through this whole process, if I'm being honest with you. I have my 𝗦cie Ibanez S series, Prestige S series S5, whatever it is. I have that plugged into a noise gate, first of all, because it's a very noisy rig. So I have that running 4-cable method just to keep things quiet while I'm talking at you. But that is plugged into the heavy metal HM2. This is the new 𝗦cie version, running in classic mode. It's off right now, so who cares? And then I'm just plugged into the Metal Zone pedal, plugged into the front of this XXL PV XXL trans tube. I'm using my Boss 𝗦cie tube amp expander. The only thing I'm using this for right now is to convert the preamp output from the amplifier to XLR, so that way I can record that as well. Now let's talk about the cabinet, the big variable in this whole thing. So like you guys saw, built the cabinet. I'm naming 𝗦ci because, you know, it's not 100% square. It's pretty close, but, you know, it's a little jalopy. I have every single speaker mic'd up, so we're using 4 microphones. I don't have 4 SM57s, so I'm using the closest things I have to SM57s. I have 2 SM57s. One is on the T75, one is on that 10-inch greenback. I have an Audix i5, which is on the GK 100, god damn it, I forget the name of the speaker. You know, the Slipknot one. And then I have an SE Electronics V7X on the EVH Iconic speaker. Now, in my humble opinion, this is way too many different speakers to have in a cabinet. It's weird sounding. Like there's some dissonance in between some of these speakers. I think it would probably sound a lot better if I had 2 matching 10-inch speakers and 2 matching 12-inch speakers. You know, even if they were different, like maybe, you know, creambacks and greenbacks or whatever. But 4 completely different speakers is a little much. I'm gonna mix these up as we go through the video. I will put what you're hearing on the bottom of the screen. But right now, let's just hear what each individual speaker looks like. And then I will actually throw an IR on the direct out of my Mesa cabinet that I normally use for some context. I'm already hearing some weird hollowness, which I'm guessing is that EVH Iconic speaker. So I'm gonna have to listen to this. We're gonna have to do this in 2 parts because I'm gonna have to like go and listen to this and then come back and, you know, make some decisions here. Let's talk about the Metal Zone. To me, this already sounds pretty close. Like this already sounds like it has that HM2 sound in it, but the HM2 is bypassed. This cab has a tremendous amount of low end, just I don't know, the way I built it or something. I don't really know the speakers inside, no idea. But it is very dark and has a lot of low end, so I'm trying to control that here a little bit, but I'm gonna turn this low end up just a smidge. Okay, so to me that already sounds really close, but let's put the HM2 in there. I have it at a very minimal level right now, and then we'll just play with these settings a little bit. Here's with no pedals, this is just a clean channel. Which is like kind of a warm, you know, edge of breakup-y sort of sound. So here's my 2 cents. There's not really a subtle way to use an HM2 in front of a Metal Zone pedal. It's just such an extreme pedal. While I do agree that there's something chainsaw-esque about that tone, I don't think it's the HM2. I just think it's the fact that a Metal Zone was running in front of an amplifier. Now the other caveat I want to throw out here is maybe it wasn't running in front of the amplifier. Maybe it was just running into the power amp section. I mean, Anders himself said that, Anders, is it a hard on? Be really embarrassed if I'm saying his name wrong this whole time.
Hi, this is Anders from At Gates.
Anders. Okay, apologies, it's not a hard on, it's a soft on. Anders even admits that his recollection of the settings are a little bit hazy, so, you know, maybe the exact signal chain is a little bit hazy as well. I mean, it's been a lot of years. Are you gonna hold this guy's feet to the fire or whatever? Let's try going into the power amp in on this amplifier and see if that changes things. Sounds quite a bit different. I think this sounds better than plugged into the front of an amplifier, but I digress. I'm not trying to go for what I think sounds better. I'm just trying to, explore this topic here a little bit. Essentially, now that we're using the Metal Zone as a preamp pedal, let's see if using the HM2 as a boost has any significant change. No matter what settings I use with the HM2 going into the Metal Zone, it ends up sounding like a blown out fuzz pedal. And that's what the HM2 is known for. That's why people like this pedal. But I think when you listen to Slaughter of the Soul and you hear that, Swedish chainsaw sort of sound, I think that it could be coming from just the Metal Zone. They sound like they have some subtle chainsawness going on, but they sound quite a bit different from something like Entombed. For example. So, going back to the Metal Zone here. Take this at face value. This is just my opinion from experimenting with these pedals a lot over the last few years. But, I've just always thought that, the HM2 is like a bit much. I'm going to listen back to this right now and listen to these speakers. Something going on with this cab. So I want to listen to the individual speakers real quick and then come back to this and maybe hopefully come to some conclusions. Okay, so I'm listening back to this right now and all of the signals sound pretty strong out of all the speakers, but the EVH Iconic sound, it's that hollow sound that I was talking about that I was hearing from the cabinet. So here's the EVH Iconic. It's a T75. Yeah, I just think it sounds a little bit better without it. So I'm gonna swap this out. I felt weird about this whole time. So I actually did get another speaker. I sort of cheated here and got a non-Celestion speaker. So this is a WGS Retro 10, which I believe is their 10-inch version of a Vintage 30. So I think this might be a little bit closer to what was being used in the 90s versus that EVH Iconic speaker. So I'm just gonna swap this out real quick. Okay, we're back into the front of the amplifier using just the Metal Zone. I think this sounds better. I think that the EVH Iconic speaker, while I'm not trying to dunk on it, on its own it sounds fine, but blended with all these speakers, it was sounding weird. It sounded so much different than all the other speakers and just not in a great way, but I think that this sounds a lot more balanced. Let's try the HM2 again, see if that changed anything with the HM2. I don't think it's going to, but To my ear, the HM2, it sounds too compressed, too fuzzy. I know Andrew said that's what he was using in the signal chain, but just hear me out. Maybe it was only a Metal Zone. I'm just saying. Okay, this is the last configuration of things that I have here. As I was going back through the notes and everything and digging through all the interviews and stuff, I was listening to the Slaughter of the Soul album, and there's a section where there's a clean tone and cold, I believe it is, where you can hear the clean guitar, and I thought to myself, that's probably just the pedals bypassed. And it's like a very, very clean, much cleaner than the PV amplifier. So I thought I would get out the valve state and then we'll try the HM2 into the Metal Zone again, because if you are going to do, you probably need like the cleanest channel possible, I'm guessing. I also got out the SD1 because I can't just overlook that detail, whether or not it's factually true. I don't know. If you're not aware of the Marshall valve state, this does have a tube in it, but the tube only affects the second channel. We're just using the normal channel on clean right now, which is a solid state channel. This is the tone. It's just super, super duper clean. So let's go Metal Zone. Much, much different into this amplifier. Let's just turn the distortion all the way. You can see, still with the distortion all the way up, we still get that chainsaw sort of effect just with the Metal Zone into the front of an amplifier. I think it probably just has to do with the way Boss pedals use clipping. It's very similar to the HM2. Let's put the HM2 in front of it though and see what happens. This is much better to me. If you're going to use an HM2 to boost a Metal Zone pedal, definitely go into the most pristine, clean channel you can, in my opinion. But it still does sound a little too square wavy, a little too fuzzy for me. I don't know. I'll go really back and forth with this. Sometimes I listen to the album and I'm like, oh, that's definitely an HM2. I use the HM2, get something that I think sounds close, go back and listen to the album, and I'm like, ah, it's way too much. And then you take the HM2 out and you're like, oh, that's it. And then you play with it for a while and then you go back and you listen to the album, and so on and so forth for time infinite. Let's try the SD1. This one's very interesting because with the SD1, we are getting some of that chainsaw tone, but it's very subtle. It's much more subtle than you can do with an HM2. To be honest with you, I don't really know that it matters too much. I think the much more compelling story of this whole tone quest is about Anders and his father building a cabinet in what I assume was a very cold garage in the middle of Sweden. There's no way they could have known that the guitar cabinet that they were building would be on such an iconic metal album. And to me, that's way more interesting on whether or not they used an SD1 or an HM2. And I think a lot of the time, that part of the story gets glossed over in favor of glazing the HM2. And the other thing is, I think Anders and At the Gates really deserve a debt of gratitude for how much they influenced the death metal scene as a whole, globally, not just in Sweden. I mean, I know that my own guitar playing, my songwriting style, was definitely heavily influenced by At the Gates. So there's a big sort of takeaway that I have from this episode, and hopefully it resonates with you also. A lot of times I see this mentality that you have to have a certain piece of gear to play a certain type of music or to take your own or other people's music seriously, and that's just not true. Look, I'm a gear nerd. I love nerding out on gear and checking out new stuff and doing this channel. It's one of my favorite things ever, but I'm also aware that through sharing that experience, it can be perceived as you need X because of Y and Z. I've also tried more and more over time keeping my videos leaning informational rather than sensational, if you know what I mean. I definitely want other gear nerds or collectors or hoarders to get the information they're looking for and enjoy the videos I make. But I'm also glad that I get to make videos like this that showcase what you can do for yourself. The best tool you can have is not a $6,000 guitar, it's creativity. That gives you the ability to write cool riffs or decide to build your own guitar cabinet if you feel so inclined. I hope that that comes through on this one, because if an absolutely iconic and timeless album can be tone worship for so many years and inspire so many bands and records, all with pretty budget gear, it's not the gear that makes something great, it's the musicians that wield it. This video also wouldn't be complete if we didn't talk about Thomas and his influence. Thomas has such a unique voice, his shrieking execution always stood out to me, but what stuck with me more was his introspective lyrical content. One of my favorite lines from Slaughter of the Soul is the chorus of Cold, where he says, "I feel my soul go cold, only the dead are smiling. I feel that shit in my core every time I hear it." And I hope Thomas is smiling wherever he is. All right, thank you guys for being here. This one took a long time to make. I was also really nervous to make it. I love this album. And I just wanted to do a good job, and I couldn't imagine making this video and not attempting to make my own guitar cab. That's just not an option in my mind. Sometimes I'll have these ideas for videos and they get scrapped for the sake of being able to put out a video by a certain date, but I didn't want to do that with this one, so that's why I've been teasing it for like 3 months. Apologies for that. Also, thank you to Gear Exchange and Sweetwater for sponsoring this video. Couldn't have made it without you guys. Use the link in the description. It really, really helps out this channel. Okay, thank you again. If you like it, you know what to do. You probably know who these people are. I'll see you guys in the next one.